and the places that you know seem like fantasy. There's a light inside your soul that's still shining in the cold, with the truth, the promise in our hearts. Don't forget, I'm with you in the dark.
The Fat Controller had ordered the viaduct for the main line to be fixed up, but this meant the engines on the main line had to go slower so they wouldn't break the viaduct. This made their trains later and later. No one was more upset about this than Thomas. I can't be kept waiting for Henry and James with their trains. They need to hurry up for once. At last, Henry lost patience. If we hurried over the viaduct, you would not have any more passengers. And then what would you do? I'd run my trains properly, said Thomas cockily as he left. Usually, when Bertie arrived at the station, Thomas would normally be there ready to take his passengers. But because the viaduct was being fixed up, Bertie came earlier than Thomas, and his passengers had to wait for Thomas to arrive. What's the matter, Thomas? You out of breath? Said Bertie one day. We should have another race. Thomas went bluer than ever. I don't need to race you to show that I'm not late. And Thomas fumed away. The next day, Thomas was super late because James was late with his train. Sorry, Thomas, I got hold up, said James. I don't need excuses, said Thomas as he puffed away. As Thomas reached the tunnel, he saw Bertie the bus. Thomas, said Bertie, I've broken down. Please take my passengers to the station. This raised Thomas's spirits, for it turns out he wasn't late at all. Of course, Bertie, said Thomas. The passengers went into Annie and Clarabel, and before Thomas left, he told Bertie he would get help. That evening, Bertie met Thomas at the sheds. I'm sorry I teased you, Thomas, said Bertie. That's all right, Bertie, said Thomas. You were just joking. Sometimes I guess being late isn't so bad after all. Ever since Duck spoke the city of Churro, he had boasted constantly about his legacy. The coach and the truck behaved fine, but the engines were annoyed by him. There are two ways of doing things, he would say. The Great Western way, or the wrong way. I'm Great Western and don't we know it. Then one day, a diesel engine arrived on Sodor. I'd like your engines to be diesel, said the Fat Controller. I've given him a test run for the island. Duck, please show him around. Good morning, slithered Diesel. My, is that James, and Henry, and Gordon too? You have all very famous and smart engines. Duck was annoyed, and asked Diesel to come with him already. So this is the yard, said Diesel and amused. Your fat hat or whatever it calls. It's the Fat Controller, said Duck. Yes, whatever. He thinks we diesel engines need a test run. We diesels don't need one. We are revolutionary. We come to a yard and set it in its place. And if that's the case, said Duck, chiming in, why don't you fetch some trucks for me while I get Gordon's couches? And Duck left. An hour later, Duck returned to the yard to find Diesel carrying some trucks. They were old and broken and had not been moved for a long time. Of course, Diesel didn't know this, and I'm sorry to say he was about to find out. Pull, push, backwards, forwards, the trucks screamed. Growled Diesel. He was struggling more than ever. Duck watched with amusement. Oh, we can't! We won't! Moaned the trucks. Diesel just growled even more. pulled so hard that some of the brake locks were breaking. With a mighty pull, Diesel shot forward, derailing some of the trucks. Laughed Duck. Diesel tried to move back and move the trucks again, but they were derailed. "So I've seen you've got the yard all intact," said Duck mockingly. "But I don't really need those trucks." "Why didn't you tell me?" said Diesel. "You seem to have much more fun being whatever you called it. Goodbye," said Duck innocently as he left. Diesel had to clean up the mess he made, while the trucks mocked him by singing. Diesel as he sulked back to the sheds. When Duck returned to the yard, he was horrified. "Shut up," said the trucks bullying Diesel. "I'm sorry our trucks bullied you," said Duck. "It was your fault," said Diesel angrily. "Nonsense," said Gordon out of nowhere. "Duck wouldn't do such a thing. Tricking the trucks into telling us bad things it's disgraceful," said Gordon. "Disgusting," said James. "Despicable," finished Henry. This gave Diesel a naughty idea. Next day, he spoke to the trucks privately. "You made a good joke about me," sneered Diesel. I laughed and laughed. "I have new jokes for you lot. It's about Gordon, James, and Henry. But don't tell them I told you. Only tell them Duck told you," said Diesel as he sneered away. The rest of that day, whenever Gordon, James, or Henry passed the trucks, they would call them names that they would be offended by. "Disgraceful," "disgusting," "despicable." "This will not stand," proudly said Henry. "We'll teach that Duck a lesson he'll never forget." Later at the sheds, Gordon, James, and Henry stared angrily at Duck while blocking his entrance. "Let me in," said Duck angrily. "Keep out. What's the meaning of this?" "You know what you did." "I don't." "You do." "I don't." "You do." "What's this nonsense?" said the Fat Controller, annoyed. "Duck has called us names of the truck, sir," said Gordon, "and we've blocked him out of the sheds." "What names did the trucks call you?" said the Fat Controller. "Duck called me a galloping sausage." "Rusty red scrap iron." "I'm old square wheels." "Duck, is this true?" "To be honest, sir, I wish I thought of those names myself, but I can firmly say I don't." "Diesel, what do you have to say about this?" "I don't know what got into Duck, sir," said Diesel. "I saw him mocking with the trucks. Duck, I've got no choice but to send you away to Edward Station until you can behave." "Do you want me to leave now, sir?" said Duck sadly. "Yes." And Duck sadly puffed away, while Diesel wickedly smiled behind their backs. Duck was banished to Edward's branch line. "It's not fair," said Duck. "Diesel got scot-free away with his crimes, and I took the blunt of it." "It's all right," said Edward. "The Fat Controller will forget about it after a few days. In the meantime, just help me out, and the Fat Controller will change his mind." And so Duck helped Edward on his branch line, and they did a wonderful job. Then one day, Duck was just heading back after helping Pippa with a train. He was humming a song to himself when his driver heard something in the distance. "I don't like that," said his driver. "It sounds like a runaway. Why isn't the guard putting his brakes on?" Unfortunately, he was right. It was a runaway. Nearly 20 trucks from Edward. Come on, I'm not going to handle 20 trucks. Duck had to race down the hill as fast as he could.
"We've broken away! We've broken away!"
yelled the trucks. "Steady, old boy," said Duck's driver. They've caught up. But the worst was soon to come. There was Gordon at the express in the distance. "Be careful, Duck," said his driver. "It's all up to you." Duck was horrified by this. Luckily, he was subverted into a siding, but unfortunately, the end of that siding had a barber shop. The barber was shaving a customer at the time. "Excuse me, sir," said Duck. "No, I won't," said the barber. "You frightened my customer. Now I'll teach you." And he lathered Duck's face. The silly trucks had pushed Duck into a siding, breaking through the buffers and broken into the wall of the barber shop. Later, the Fat Controller came to see the wreckage. "What's the meaning of this?" he said. "I don't like engines popping through my walls." Duck saved you from a nasty accident. If he hadn't, this could have been, well, a close shave. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know," said the barber. And he cleaned off Duck's face at once. An hour later, Thomas helped Duck out of the barber shop. "I've told City of Terror about this, and he's very proud of you, Duck. And once you are fixed up, you will go back to the sheds where you belong." "But the others hate me, sir," said Duck. "They side with Diesel." "I never believed Diesel for a second," said the Fat Controller. "I sent that devil away. He'll never return to this island. Now go to the works, Duck. The engines are waiting for you." A few days later, Duck returned to the sheds, where the engines had a grand hurrah to Duck the Great Western Engine. Off the rails. One day, Gordon was resting in a siding. Sometimes he thought, it's really important to be such a large and important engine. One does think of appearances, so, "Beep, beep. Hello, fat face," said Henry to Gordon. "Pah, fancy him speaking to me like that. Me, who has never had an accident." Percy, the small engine, who was curious, came up to Gordon and asked, "Aren't jammed whistles and burst safety valve accidents?" "Of course not," said Gordon. "They're just simply minor inconveniences." "Okay," said Percy, but he wasn't fully convinced. So Percy soon left on his way, but not without feeling annoyed. Later that day, Gordon's crew came to speak. "We have a train to pull, Gordon. Scooters or freight cars?" "Freight cars." "But freight cars, I'm not pulling it." And soon, Henry gave them the pull express. "Be careful with the coaches, Henry," said Gordon. "You're not pulling the flying kipper now." Henry just ignored Gordon and soon left to pull the train. Gordon, however, was so stubborn, he had to have Edward help shunt him to the sheds. I won't go, said Gordon, irritated. Gordon was thinking of how he could get out of doing work. He
moves forward slightly to damage the turntable, but he couldn't stop himself in time and slid into a ditch. "Whoosh!" he hissed. "Get me out! Get me out!" "No, I'm not alive," said his crew. "You stuck, you stupid big engine." The vac controller, meanwhile, had a telephone on the line. I wasn't informed of the matter. "So, let me get this. Gordon got stuck in a ditch. We'll get him later. I know. My nun can teach him a lesson." Soon, some boys started to make fun of him. "Silly old Gordon fell in the ditch, fell in the ditch, fell in the ditch. Silly old Gordon fell in the ditch, all on a Monday morning." Poor Gordon felt like he would never get out of the ditch throughout the day. It took until later that night for Henry and James to come, with slick wheels being placed to help Gordon grip the mud. At long last, Gordon had got back on the rails, and soon shuffled sadly to his shed. But between you and me, however, I don't think Gordon, the big engine, will be doing something as silly as trying to ride into ditches to avoid his work ever again. Don't you, my friends, agree?
One day, Thomas was at the station when Gordon came up with some trucks. Said Thomas. "What a funny smell. Can you smell a smell?" "No one noticed it till you did," said Gordon. "It must be yours." "Well," said Thomas to his coaches, "do you know what I think the smell is?" "Jesus Christ, please no." "It's ditch water." Gordon just snorted as Thomas left. "That was quite rude, said Annie and Clarabel. Thomas had mocked Gordon for falling into a ditch. But Thomas really didn't care. He dropped off his coaches and went to work. Long ago, miners had digged through a pathway under the ground, but had caused the land on top to be weaker for the engine to pass over. So when Thomas saw a sign that read, "Danger! Engines must not pass this board," he didn't think it twice before reading it. "Stupid board," said Thomas, and he made a plan. Jolt! He banged so hard, his driving fireman fell off his footplate. "Come back," yelled his driver. "Cinders and ashes," said Thomas. "I'm stuck." And he was. "Oh dear, I am a silly engine." "And a very naughty one too," said the Fat Controller. "I saw you. We will need Gordon to help you get out, as he's the only engine available at the moment." Thomas felt scared. "Oh dear," he said. "Gordon will mock me for sure." And he was right. "Down a mine, has he?" said Gordon to himself, chuckling. Gordon soon arrived to save Thomas. He was hooked up with lines and hooks to couple up to Thomas. "Are you ready? Heave!" Gordon pulled and pulled and pulled with all his might. And after a few minutes, Thomas was free. "I'm sorry I teased you," said Thomas. "That's all right," said Gordon. "Let's make an alliance to work together." "Okay," said Thomas. and the two engines puffed off into the sunset. Thomas the tank engine had not been feeling well lately, so Edward had to take Thomas to the works. The Fat Controller came to see Duck about the matter. "Duck, I'm putting you in charge of Thomas's branch line until he comes back." Annie and Clarabel enjoyed Duck's company. They both told Duck about the time Thomas left the guard at the station. When Thomas came back, the coaches told him all about Duck and how well he did. Thomas was at first jealous, but he didn't mind. Because of Thomas's illness, his brakes had to be put on more pressure, meaning he had to stop quickly at the station. This meant he would sometimes overlap the platform. One day his normal driver was sick, and an inspector had to take his place. But the inspector did not know he had to put more pressure on Thomas's brake. One day he was talking to the station master and the fireman at the station when Thomas suddenly started moving. It was little at first, but he started getting faster and faster. Thomas tried everything to get their attention, but it was no use. By the time they noticed, Thomas had already left the station. Quickly the inspector hurried to herald the helicopter, and a chase was on. Poor Thomas was scared out of his smoke box. He wondered if he would crash. Harold the helicopter flew by to get to Thomas first. At last, after an hour, Thomas had slowed down to a crawl due to his lack of steam. The inspector got onto the station, and as Thomas just reached him, he jumped inside and turned Thomas' brakes hard on. The inspector soon let a sigh of relief. Thomas knew all too well and agreed.